We're good.
Okay, I'm going to start off with a hypothetical situation that's going to seem kind of ridiculous, but just stick with me. So imagine it's a Monday before a big week of homework. You sit down and you decide to make a to-do list. But as you make the to-do list, the importance of this to-do list is special in that if you don't complete everything, you're going to die. And so naturally, you're pretty motivated to get things done, and you sit down, you start trying to knock stuff out, but you realize you don't have enough time to do everything on the list, and you have no idea how to do this stuff on your list because everything is in Greek, and you don't know Greek. So you realize that this list, which is full of good things to do, and it's supposed to help you get a good thing in a college degree, is actually going to bring you death. While this hypothetical situation is pretty ridiculous, it's somewhat of an example of how the law was viewed in Martin Luther's time and how Luther viewed it as he was growing up. He viewed it as a way to get to God, but as he developed his theology, he realized that he was morally dead and the law was of no use. While it was a good thing, it couldn't help him get to God, and so that helped develop his theology of justification by faith. Why should you listen to me today? Well, I'm reading through a biography of Martin Luther in my spare time, and I served as a pastoral apprentice at my church for a summer before I came to Dordt. And why should you care? You should care because Luther's theology is in your everyday life and in your deepest moments of regret. It's a deep comfort. So Martin Luther's theology offers deep comfort to those who realize their deep sinfulness. And I'm going to show this through 3 points: Luther's formation, his failures, and his fortress. First, Luther's formation. So as Luther was growing up, a big question that plagued him was how he could be right with God. And he ended up becoming a monk and then a priest and a professor. And through his time as professor, he, especially the books of Psalms and Romans, he began to see that humans are morally dead, which was a problem with how he viewed salvation, because at the time, salvation was viewed as God gives grace through a pactum or a covenant of God. Pretty much, God helps those who help themselves, which is a problem when you're dead. You can't really help yourself when you're dead, which led to Luther's development of the grounds of the covenant that God gives grace as humility, or seeing yourself as sinful, which then led the way to a change in faith as the grounds on which you get grace. This theology of morally deadness without God leads me to Luther's failings. So in Edwards' book called Luther's Last Battles in 1983, he talks about how Luther was often angry and harsh in his arguments, and he was, especially later on in his life, he was anti-Semitic, which he was very much against Jews. He wrote a treatise called On the Jews and Their Lies. And so his various racism against Jews and his anger, those are things that are really bad, but they don't negate the good things that he said, but we can't ignore them, because they're examples that his life lived out his own theology that, apart from God, were morally dead. And so what gives Luther his confidence even though he is morally dead? That leads me to my final point of Luther's fortress. So some big ideas which are mentioned in Carl Trueman's book, Luther on the Christian Life from 2015. Some big ideas that were pretty foundational for Luther and he's pretty famous for are the ideas of paradox and the inversion of logic, such as a victory through death. Jesus dying brings victory. And then simul justus et peccator, which is Latin for simultaneously just and a sinner. So at the same time we realize our deep sinfulness, we're also justified by Christ, which is related to his very famous doctrine of justification, which is related to this glorious exchange, wherein we receive Christ's righteousness while Christ receives all of our sins, which is absolutely incredible that we get this deep, deep comfort that no matter how sinful we are, we're still righteous through Christ, and it's not about what we've done. And so, I hope you saw today that Luther's theology is of deep comfort for those who understand their deep sinfulness. And I show this through 3 points of Luther's foundation, Luther's failings, and Luther's fortress. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Luther's Heidelberg Disputation in 1518, which appears in the book Luther's Work, Volume 31, edited by Harold Grimm. Quote, "The law says, do this, and it's never done. But grace says, believe in this, and everything is already done." End quote. Thank you.